It's easy to believe the worst when you're sitting in the middle of a hard chapter. The kind of chapter that drains you, confuses you. The kind of chapter where your job is gone. The relationship fell apart. The doors you prayed would open slam shut. It's the chapter where nothing makes sense and everything hurts. Where your prayer is hitting the ceiling and your faith feels like it's running on fumes. It's dark right now. Doesn't mean the story is over. Just this season is painful doesn't mean God changed his mind. Just because this chapter is filled with conflict doesn't mean promise has been cancelled. It's a chapter, not a conclusion. You don't stop reading in the middle of the tension because you know something better is coming. The author is setting something up. You trust that the pain has a purpose. The page you believe the story hasn't peaked yet. Why? Then do we treat our lives any different? Tough chapter and assume we failed. We think delay is denial. We think the detour disqualified us. We get stuck in this mental loop, replaying the worst parts of the story like they're the whole story. But what you're walking through now is only one scene in a much bigger narrative. God isn't finished. And if he's not finished, neither is your story. See, the enemy will love for you to believe this is it, that you've messed up too much. Much time has passed. The opportunity is gone. But that's not how your author writes. God doesn't rip up the pages. He redeems them. He uses every twist, every wrong turn, every heartbreak as ink for what's coming next. And let's be real, some of the chapters you're embarrassed about are pages to hide from everyone else. Those may be the very parts God uses to set the stage for your purpose. Because in pretty stories, he writes powerful ones, honest ones, messy, redemptive, changing stories that don't make sense until the end. So if this chapter has you in tears, keep reading it. This chapter feels silent, keep reading. If this chapter looks like everything is falling apart, keep reading. Because it will be on the very next page. What you feel right now is not the full measure of what's real. Emotions are valid, but not final. They are indicators, dictators. This isn't where your story stops, where the character is formed, where your identity is shaped, where your face starts to stress what you can see. And let me say this clearly, God's promises are no chapter sensitive. What he spoke of your life in a previous season doesn't expire because you're in a tough one out. He did bring you this far just to leave you hang in the middle. His word still stands when the scenery doesn't match the vision yet. Even when your current page doesn't look like the prophecy you were holding on to. His promises were never about perfection, they were about presence. So maybe this chapter doesn't like victory, but it's still holy. Maybe it doesn't feel like progress, but it's still sacred. Maybe it's full of waiting, weeping, wondering, but it's still written with intention. Because in the hands of the author, no page, no pause. He's writing something that's going to make sense in hindsight. He's weaving the struggle into the storyline. He's taking what was meant to break. You're using the next scene somewhere along the way. You start thinking that God's promise depended on how well you palm. That if you prayed enough, worked hard enough, be perfectly said the right things at the right time, you'd earn what he already said was yours. That believing that your obedience was the transaction, not the response. That behavior was the currency, not the fruit. But you need to understand God's promise was never based on your perfection. It was based on his character. It was spoken not because you earned it, but because he chose you for it. It was declared over your life not because of it altogether, because he saw your end from the beginning, flaws, failures, and all, and still said, but yes, we've been conditioned to think good must be earned, that love has to be proven, that faith to be achieved, that blessings are the result of performance. The kingdom operates on promise and promise on purpose, on purpose. Yes, obedience matters. Yes, to matters. Yes, faithful messengers, but those things don't create the promise. They position you to walk in it. And in God's yes, you're aligning with, look at the lives of the people God used most. Abraham lied. Moses murdered. Pete denied. Paul persecuted. None of them had perfect resumes, but all of them had purpose. God did wait until they were able to extend his hand. He extended his hand first, and it was encountered to transform their lives. So while you still living like you mistakes canceled your calling, while you still acting like you stumbled, disqualified you from the promise is not fragile. It's not threatened by your struggle. It's not revoked because you didn't get it right the first time. That contract was in ink, it was written in blood, and God is not a man that he should lie. No, it's not a man that he should change his mind. If he said it, he will do it. Even if you've had sex, old insecurity, even if your past feels heavier than you hoped, you've got to free from performance to faith. The kind of faith will wear you out. It's keep you chasing approval you already have. It'll make you think every delay is your fault. Even every closed door is God punishing you. But grace says you're still chosen. Mercy says, but I'm not finished says, but it was never about your ability. It was always about my love. You don't have to pump to stay in God's will. You just have to trust. You just have to surrender. You just have to believe what God started in you. He is faithful, complete, even when you fall short. Some hardest thing to believe is that you're still eligible, that after everything, the detours, the mess-ups, the shame, the stuff you don't talk about, the promise still stands. But that's the nature of grace. It refuses to give on what called good, doesn't look at your track record, he looks at your heart. He looks at your willingness to get back, your will to be molded, your courage to keep walking even when you're limping. And he says, oh, my promise didn't change, you be bruised, but you're not broken beyond redemption. You may feel behind, but you're right on schedule for what God's preparing you for. You may have lost some battles, but you lost the war because the promise is anchored in how well you perform and how others see you, not in how flawless. Your journey looks but in the faithfulness of one who called you before you knew who you were. You can't receive next if your hands are still grieving what's behind. There come in every journey where holding on becomes heavier than letting go. Where the page you once cherished now feel more like a prison. And even though you know something new is calling you, fear makes you stay in what's familiar. It's because you're weak. It's because you love that page. You prayed for the page and gave your all to live that chapter. So letting go doesn't feel like transition. It feels like loss, and yet God keeps whispering to turn the page. You don't need to hate the season you're in to know that it's over. Good, full of joy, growth, success, but even good things can become stale when God is trying to move you forward. The promise is still alive, but the setting is shifted. And if you're not careful, you'll stay away being out of loyalty to who you used to be. There's a difference between gratitude and attachment. God for the chapter and still recognize it's time to move on. You can honor the lessons without idolizing the season. But when your identity be tied to the page, you start believing the story kind of without it. And that's the lie the enemy wants you to believe, that what's ahead can't be better than what's behind. Sometimes the hardest pages to turn are the one you found comfort. The job that gave you stability. The relationship that felt like forever. The version of yourself that knew the rules of the last chapter. Always calling. And peace isn't always passive. Sometimes peace pushes you into places where you have no control. Where you're forced to trust faith is no longer theory but practice. The closer chapter gently or abruptly when he knows it's no longer serving your purpose. Not because he's punishing you, but because he's preserving you. Because he knows ahead will stretch you in ways the old page prepare you for. But as long as you're clutching that page, you will no capacity to hold the new thing he's trying to place in your hands. Letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing when the page has served its purpose. It's the courage to trust that what's coming is worth the surrender. And it's the faith to believe the author of your story still knows how to write beautiful chapters. But don't be surprised if you go through a grieving process. It's okay to mourn the chapter that once made you feel alive. God's not asking you pretend it didn't matter. He's asking to believe it's not all that matters. More clarity, more promise, but only if you're willing to release your grip. Sometimes the very thing you think you're losing is the weight that's been holding you down. And the freedom craving is weight on the other side of your release. But you can't reach for the next page. Your fists are clenched around the last one. You've got to open your hands. Open your mind to truth that God's not done writing. Just because the last page held memories doesn't mean the next one won't hold miracles. Because you don't know what's coming doesn't mean it isn't good. But it's also sacred. It's the space where transformation happens, where obedience is tested, where faith is real. And while the last chapter taught you, shape you, and maybe even saved you, it's not your forever home. It was a hallway, destination, a season, not your story, a paragraph, the horopus. And God says, turn the page. It's because he's already written what comes next. We live in a world moves fast. Fast food, fast money, fast success. Faster. So when God says, but wait, it can feel like punishment, like something's gone wrong, like maybe the promise isn't coming. But delay is not the same thing as denial. And just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it's not still on the way. Delay is not God's rejection. It's often his redirectionment, his refinement. It's the sacred between the calling and the fulfillment, not to frustrate you, but to form you. You see, we tend to focus the outcome, the thing we're praying for, fighting for, hoping for. But God focuses on what's happening in you while you wait. Because the promise isn't just about what you'll get, it's about who you'll be when you get it. If God gave you everything you ask for right now, would you be able to sustain it? Could your character carry the weight of the blessing? Could your spirit steward the responsibility? That's why development matters. And that's what delay is really doing, shaping your roots before he elevates your reach. Look at David, anointed king as a teenager, but he trained crown until years later. What was God doing that delay? Developing him, training him in the field and in the caves, strengthening his hand to battles no one else saw. So that when the crown came, the man wore the character to carry a dream, and then his life took a detour. Betrayal, slavery, prison. It looks like a denial, but it was divine development. God was building in him the wisdom, the resilience, the spirit he'd need to save nations. If Joseph had escaped the pit too soon, he wouldn't have made the palace prepared. God is not slow, he is strategic. And some delay is the evidence of just how much he loves you, because he won't give you something that will crush you. He won't send you to a platform that your private life isn't ready to support. He won't let you past the seals to be rooted. And yes, waiting is hard. Waiting stretches your faith. Waiting exposes your fear and your sense of identity, because in the still the voice of doubt gets louder. Then he whispers, see, God forgot about you. It's not going to happen. You missed it. But that's a lie. It means the promise expired. It means the preparation is still underway. And even it looks like nothing. Something is. God does his best work underground, in the dark, in the secret place. Your strength is forged. Your trust is tested. Your voice is refined. If you rush the process, you know results, but with the refining the position. But may gain not the peace. You may receive the platform. God's the power. God's still never wasted. The intense cycle filled with purpose. You're not being overlooked. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. And even though the doors haven't opened yet, and the prayer haven't been answered the way you hoped, that doesn't mean they won't be. It just means the timing isn't now. There's a version of you that God sees. And he's committed to building that person through every season, including the ones where you feel stuck. Stagnation is actually strategy. Sometimes what feels like a wall is really a wound. Hold you to the right the moment is not just trying to bless you, he's trying to build you. He's making sure foundation is deep enough to handle the destiny. That takes time. That takes seasons that don't make sense. That takes delay, not denying the promise, but because he's developing the person who will carry it, wisdom and strength. There are seasons in life where the hardest thing you ever do is not to endure the pain, it's to let go of what's familiar in the page. Not because you want to move forward, but because moving forward means leaving behind you once depended on. And when God says it's time to shift, time to transition, time to move on, it's not your strength that carries you, it's your trust. Be strong and still stuck. You can be powerful and still paralyzed. The next chapter isn't accessed by physical might or mental grit. It's accessed by faith. Trust is the bridge between what you understand and God unfold, and sometimes that looks like walking a future you cannot see, leaving behind a past you don't want to release. It takes strength to fight, but it takes trust to surrender, and too often we confuse surrender with weakness. We think we can just push harder, grind longer, force the outcome, we'll finally break through. But what if the next chapter doesn't require another push when it requires a release? Turning the page is always about action. So it's about alignment. It's about recognizing when a season is over, even if it didn't the way you expected. It's about trusting that God's plan is still in motion, even when your plans fell apart. And it's about believing your story is still unfolding, even when this chapter feels like a loss. Trust doesn't always come naturally, especially when the page you're on was painful. You've cried through this season. You've prayed, it hoped, and maybe even wondered if God forgot. So when he whispers, it's in turn the page, it doesn't feel like relief, it feels like risk. Because what if the next chapter hurts too? One known is harder than the pain you already know how to manage. That's where trust becomes more than a word. That's where comes the fuel for the journey forward. It's easy to trust when the path is clear, but real trust shows up when the lights are out. And all you'll hear is a whisper in your spirit telling you to move. Real demand all the answers. It says, but God, I don't know what's next, but I trust that you do. It says, Pum, I'm afraid. But I'm sills by, I don't have to see the whole staircase. I'll take the next step. Be wait for a sign, a door, miracle. But God is waiting for your trust. He's waiting for you to stop leaning in your own strength and lean into his promise. Because strength will run out. Strength will try to carry everything on your back. The old and the new and the people, the pressure will teach you to lay it down. Trust the same God who brought you through the last chapter is the same God writing the next one. That he'd bring you this far to leave you now. That he's still the author and finisher, still the shepherd of your story, still faithful, complete he began. And yes, it's scary, it's vulnerable to let go. It's uncomfortable to step in the unfamiliar, but comfort's in the goal, calling is. And the only way your calling is to trust the one who called you. If you're standing on the edge, staring at the next chapter, afraid to page, know this, it's your strength that's going to get you through. Your resume, relationships, your reputation, it's trust. Trust the promise still stands. God hasn't changed his mind. Trust that what's next is greater even if it doesn't look like it yet. Turning the page isn't about proving anything to anyone, it's about trusting the one who wrote the story. It's about releasing control and stepping into what's already been prepared. Because the next chapter is waiting for your perfection. It's waiting for your yes.